North Korea has become famous throughout the world for all of the wrong reasons. Tales and stories of their ferocity and barbarisms are well known not only around the world, but to their own people, although they would never admit it. Simply speaking out against such horrible practices would earn any North Korean citizen and their parents and children a lifetime in a labor camp. So, it stands to reason that many of the residents of this communist country are wanting to escape. It's a dangerous prospect, though. If they're caught, the punishment would be severe. But worst of all, if they succeed, their families that are left behind would be subject to the 3 generations of punishment rule, which states that innocent members of the escapee's family, children, grandchildren, parents, grandparents, could be thrown into prison for the rest of their lives too. It's hard to risk so much. But it does happen, and thousands of people have escaped the regime. Here are 5 daring escapes from North Korea. If you enjoy this video, then be sure to subscribe to Underworld to see more just like it. Shin Sang Ho was a famous South Korean film director who was married to actress Choi Eun-hee. Together, they established Shin Film and made many movies throughout the 1960s that garnered them recognition as a team and brought South Korea's film industry lots of global attention and fame. Their fame also attracted the attention of the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-il. So, while Choi Eun-hee was in Hong Kong after being propositioned to direct a film, she was abducted by North Koreans and brought into the communist country. 6 months later, Shin was abducted while he was in Hong Kong as well. It would be another 5 years before the two were reunited. The reason they were abducted is because Kim Jong-il was a huge film aficionado and had dreams of North Korea having its own film industry that would be recognized on a global scale. So, under stress, they were forced to make movies. In actuality, Shin and Choi were impressed at the dictator's knowledge of movies as he possessed over 15,000 titles. So they set to work, making 6 movies for him. One even won an award at a film festival in Czechoslovakia. However, they had not forgotten the circumstances that brought them to where they were. So they plotted an escape. As part of their escape, they knew they would need to convince people that they did not willingly leave South Korea. So, in 1983, they were able to sneak in a tape recorder for one of their conversations with Kim Jong-il. In this recording, he admitted to what happened and even told the two that when speaking to the press, they should talk about going to North Korea willingly. They had the proof they needed and kept the recording for nearly 3 years. In 1986, while working on a new movie, the duo, along with North Korean handlers, went to Vienna, Austria to scout locations for filming and do press interviews. When meeting with a journalist at the Intercontinental Vienna Hotel, they were able to convince their handlers to leave the room. Then, they were able to tell an employee to let the United States Embassy know that they were both seeking asylum. They snuck out and got into a taxi with the journalist and sped away. After a short chase, the pair got out and sprinted into the American embassy to freedom. In 2017, an international story broke about a man named Oh Chong-sung, a 25-year-old son of a North Korean general who made a daring and unplanned escape from North Korea. On that particular day, Song had a disagreement with some of his friends, which turned into a huge argument. As a way to get away from one of the stresses, he went to a local bar and had a few drinks. Afterwards, he got into his car to drive back to the military base that he was stationed at. But, on his way, he forgot to stop at one of the various checkpoints in the area. People have been put to death in North Korea for much less. He immediately knew what it meant. So, he decided that his only option was to get out of the country and into South Korea. Song put the pedal to the metal in hopes that he could make it to the border and crash through the fence. Almost immediately, North Korean authorities started pursuing him. He continued to speed along and ended up crashing into a tree only a few hundred yards from the border. His only option from then was to run. It was a difficult run as the North Korean soldiers were pursuing him closely and firing shots in his direction. Miraculously, he was eventually able to cross the South Korean border. Song was injured but alive, and South Korean soldiers saw him and took him to a hospital in Seoul. After his recovery, he said that he did not regret his actions at all. Additionally, he went on to give sordid details about the impoverishment and cruelty that existed in North Korea. It really brings things into perspective for us when we realize that a man was willing to risk so much, crawling from 6 gunshot wounds, just for a chance at freedom. Financial success in North Korea is a very closely watched thing. The government knows that if someone becomes too wealthy, they gain influence, which could undermine the regime. That was the situation that John Ken-moo found himself in. As a hotel manager in Pyongyang, he was one of the few North Koreans to be in close contact with foreigners. It was strictly forbidden in the country. So, when it needed to happen, he would be very closely monitored. But one day, a simple gesture of hospitality changed his life forever. A delegation of Japanese Koreans were staying in the hotel. As a gift, Moo gave the men a box of ginseng. To show his gratitude, he gave Moo $300, which was a small fortune by North Korean standards. John decided to use the money to start his own business, buying clothes made cheap in China and selling them for a profit in North Korea. After a while, he ended up amassing more than $87,000, which made him incredibly wealthy in a country where most people still only make a few US dollars each month. But being wealthy comes with much danger. Large amounts of foreign currency in private hands pose a threat to authorities. Soon, he noticed that his colleagues started disappearing. He soon realized that they were being captured and killed for no other reason than being successful. Knowing that he would be next, he took drastic steps to escape the country. For a $50 bribe, he was able to obtain a forged death certificate saying that he had died in a car accident. It was the only way to ensure that the wife and children he was leaving behind would not be murdered because of his actions. Then, he was able to cross the northern border into China, where he hid for 4 months. Eventually, he made his way to a South Korean embassy and claimed asylum. They flew him to South Korea, where he shared his story along with the harrowing tales of life in the hermit country. No Kum-sok was a Korean-American engineer and aviator who served as a senior lieutenant in the Korean People's Army Air and Anti-Air Force during the Korean War. His journey to become a pilot in the North's Air Force was interesting in itself, as he had lied in the selection test in order to be accepted into the Naval Academy. Once there, he won the favor of his history professor who helped him get through the pilot selection test. He was very good at his job, earning him the promotion to lieutenant and then to senior lieutenant. Overall, he flew more than 100 combat missions during the war. However, being under the thumb of the first North Korean dictator Kim Il-sung, he knew he needed to escape. On the morning of September 21, 1953, No flew his MiG-15 from Sunan, just outside of Pyongyang, to the Kimpo Air Base in South Korea. Flying at nearly 1,000 miles per hour, it only took him 17 minutes. So, he was not pursued by North Korean aircraft, nor was he intercepted by American air or ground forces. Luckily for No, the US radar systems near Kimpo had been shut down temporarily for routine maintenance. So, he pulled in and landed the wrong way on the runway, almost hitting another jet. Captain Jim Sutton, who was circling the airport, said that if No had tried to land in the right direction, he would have been spotted and shot down. After taxiing to a free place, No got out of the plane, began tearing up a picture of the North Korean dictator, and threw his arms up in surrender. He left in custody and was debriefed by the CIA. No ended up receiving a $100,000 reward for being the first pilot to defect with an operational aircraft. However, there was a price to be paid. 5 of No's comrades and commanders were executed, one of those being his best friend and fellow pilot, Kun Soo-sung. Rising from a humble position, Hwang Jung-yup was a North Korean professor of philosophy at Kim Il-sung University who rose to be the president of the university in 1965. While at the school, he instructed Kim Jong-il, son of the North Korean leader Kim Il-sung. Sometime in the late 1950s, Hwang started working with the North Korean leader in eliminating all mentions of Soviet leader Joseph Stalin from poems and song lyrics, thereby making sure all praise was directed at Kim himself. Because of this work, Hwang became chairman of the Standing Committee of the Supreme People's Assembly, a position that he would hold for 11 years. However, in 1983, he was removed from the assembly and his standing deteriorated, even though he had been Kim Jong-il's teacher at the university. It came to the point where the only time Kim would speak to him would be to criticize him for something, specifically for taking too much of an interest in China's capitalist reforms. Eventually, this led him to fear for his life. In 1997, while on the way back from a trip to Tokyo, Hwang, along with his aide Kim Duk-hong, walked into the South Korean embassy in Beijing to seek asylum. Pyongyang immediately threatened retaliation. Beijing police sealed off the embassy while the tensions were high. Eventually, they allowed Hwang to depart for South Korea via the Philippines, where he would eventually work with the South Korean government. To this day, North Korea remains one of the most shut-off and violent regimes on Earth. Kept there by fear, many people are even afraid to think about defecting. But when escape is possible, the survivors have quite the story to tell. To see another video like this, be sure to click the link on screen now. With that, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.